Hello guys, and back to this a new one episode about the painting process of the chef. Today I'll show you how to paint the clothes of the chef and how to create something of really interesting in sort of freehand or storytelling using maybe some drawings or some special effect like probably also a blood split from this part of the tentacles. So, let's start from the palette. For this kind of clothes I choose a very dark color, maybe a sort of black with some influence of turquoise. I will use the turquoise only because we used it before and this will help me to paint everything in a more currency way and looks like well at the end thanks to an harmonic choice of color. Step by step we have added some new colors, yellow, orange, but at the end our two colors, main colors will be has been the turquoise and the violet reddish one. Those are very close to the complementary colors like green and red, but of course we don't use pure red or pure green, but different tonalities to create harmony and at the meantime keep up a very strong contrast. So let's prepare our black. For this black I choose to use Chimera black, this one. I add on the palette a bit of desaturated tones of blue and green. I'll show you which kind of color, but it's not very important the brand. I'm using these two colors because they are with matte finish, and for a cloth usually I prefer have a matte finish because it's more realistic. Of course depends by which kind of material you are trying to create. I add a bit of ivory color to use this to bright a bit the lights. In any case I'll try to keep this part of the miniature very dark because it will help me to explain better the skin tone and the strong lights on the tentacles. So let's prepare our main mix. It's a sort of very dark gray with greenish, bluish influence, greenish variation. And like always I start now sketching my texture, my lights on the figure. So let's start. For clothes usually I start sketching in a very rough way, just to start to understand all the volumes and create a sort of underpaint for our surface. So as you can see okay, let's fix everything with my hand, with my finger. Okay, fixed. So, if this kind of mistake happened to you, don't panic, just took a lot of water and remove the paint. So, I was trying to explain how I use brush on the surface to create a different kind of texture. I try to explain in a very slow gesture. I use a big brush, very new one, because I need the pointy, but I also need the tank to keep a lot of color and then I try to use it in a gentle way and try to open the brush to create different kind of texture. Every time that I use the brush, it will work in different way. This is a very expensive technique, I think, because you definitely ruin the brush. But in my opinion, is the only way to reach a good results of texture in a few steps. So I'll try now to do the same process every time with a more bright color to create a sort of layering of texture. And this will be only a underpaint step process. Then we will back to my loved airbrush to cover everything and keep the texture very thin, very soft. For example, this is the only part of the cloth of the chef that I don't paint with brush, because I need to keep this part very clear, very easy to recognize for the viewer. Same thing for the upper part. I try to keep it very smooth. And then let's paint more texture. I start every time to paint with the loaded brush from the upper part to the lower, because in this way I am able to be more saturated and more smooth, more clear on the light, and more dirty and more desaturated during the final step of the brushstroke. This because, in my opinion, it's more important to keep a very good smoothness, very good clearness and vibrancy on the lights, and it's less important to paint smooth part on the shadows, also because usually shadows are more dark, of course, but are also more, in my opinion, in my way to paint, more satin, more shiny, and this help you to cover a lot of mistakes, a lot of dirty job. So it's a common way to think for my process. I start to add a bit of ivory on the texture mix to brighten it. And then I repeat the same process this time, and the following step I start to be more accurate and I create texture more thin. It's very easy because thanks to the previously step there is a color, the same color on the surface of the model. So it's very easy incorporate this kind of texture using the same tonality. We need to keep in mind that we are painting using very easy techniques, are not something of difficult to manage. Everything is guided by a different way to think about smoothness and texture. And we use a lot of tricks to be faster, to be effective with very few brushstrokes. This will help you to enjoy more painting process, save time, and maybe paint more miniature. And painting more miniature you will be able to experiment several kind of things, so maybe improve in a faster way. This could be, at the first step, at the first look, a very terrible, dirty, messy job, but it's just underpaint. We will cover quite totally it, and we will keep the texture very very thin. Usually I prefer to paint in this way, because in this way I am more comfortable about reach out good results in a few steps. And in this way, if I want to reach out a smoothed surface, at the end it will be easier for me layering texture, a lot of texture to create the smooth surface. Maybe we can mix some strong brushstroke on the wrinkles. And step by step we are going to the lower part. I back to a strong and messy kind of brushstroke. Everything to keep a more smoothed, saturated part here and more messy and desaturated part below. Okay, so after some minutes to let dry very wild sketch, we can start to paint with airbrush and to create some shadows and cleaning. I will repeat several times this process, and probably I don't know if we will record all the steps, because at the end is a bit boring process, but I will show very better in this part how to manage it. And then I will show you the final results. So for the shadows, I explain how I choose color. Considering that at the moment on our palette we got several colors. We got a orange reddish for the tentacles, with some yellow dots that help us to create some variation. We got a skin tone that is composed by greenish part and violet. The violet is very close to the reddish part, and at the same time this kind of greenish rim lights, ambient lights, is very close to our clothes. So to keep up everything in harmony, in a very coherent way to look at the figure, I will use now bluish and greenish, very muted, very soft and desaturated inks to create shadows and variation. For this step I will use my favorite inks ever, that are Liquitex 1. I use a lot of them. One of my favorite one is the muted green, and I will use a bit of a Prussian blue hue to change and desaturate and change the tonality of the muted one. So let's do it. To start, I put a bit of muted green, pure, directly on my airbrush cap. And maybe I could add a bit of water, a bit of black color, but just a little. Quantity. and I start to airbrush from below all the figure. I don't care about different kinds of surface. I need to focus on the clothes, but it's not a problem if I airbrush also the shadows of the tentacles or the skin tone. Look how I just hit with airbrush the shadows on the skin tone, and now the contrast is very more strong because at the end it look like I added some green on a reddish shadows. So from the mid-tone of the shadows and the most deep part of the shadow I create another kind of strong contrast, and is easily to see. For example, in this part we got a reddish shadows that then become a greenish one, and this create contrast between this part and this part. At the same time it's very well balanced because we got some greenish color here, bluish greenish here and here. This is a easy process to obtain. You just need to keep in mind which kind of color you need to choose. Meanwhile I'm airbrushing, I'm covering this part, and as you can see the texture is becoming very difficult to be viewed, and it's not a problem because we will repeat this process several times. To continue the work I need to dilute a bit more because I am scared to ruin too much this kind of texture here on the upper part of the cloth. Considering that at the end I will try to keep very saturated and clean surface on the upper part of the cloth. I will try to keep a very well textured here, and at the end for the main shadows I'll try to clean so much, and I'll try to arrive quite close to the blackish cloth here. This because I don't want to ruin the focal point, creating something of interesting in this part, something of too much visible. I think that will move out the focus of the miniature from the face. The face on a boost is the most important part. Also at the end I think that I will focus very nice and important texture here. Something strange, probably, more strange than this part. In this way, when I look at the mini, my eyes will be focused on this. Maybe some very strong light here on the upper part, on the lower part of the hat, to focus the focal point on the face. And probably I will add a red part here, because the red is a very strong color that keep a lot of attention from the viewer. These kind of elements are not casual. As you can see, my palette is very limited. We are playing with red and green, and all the strange kind of color that we can obtain mixing them with other color. So, let's continue to paint the clothes. I add more water because I need to have a thin version. At the same time, to try to keep a very good balance between general shadows, we can use the same color to increase the contrast on the side part. I dry every time very well each layer. And now that I cleaned the surface, I back to my palette to create another kind of hue of my texture color, and I will restart again all the process of texturing. This time I will be a bit more accurate, and every time I will restart the process I will be more accurate than ever. I try to draw or enforce some of the wrinkles. So how you can see, I'm focusing on lights on the upper part, and then when I move to the shadows I start to be more messy. I also try to draw very well all the border. And again very messy on the shadows because I don't care. You can every time I can recover totally the smoothness here. And Surely, at this point, I'm start to understand that here the color is too bright, because if I look at the miniature, my eyes go here. So I take a bit of black, a bit of green, and I create another kind of texture value to downgrade that part. I need to downgrade it very well, because it can be important. This part can be. If in our painting of a boost we create a strong light here that take all the attention, we are missing something, we are doing a very big mistake in my opinion. A boost is a portrait, so in a portrait the most important part is the face. I think that in the end, to keep out to reach good results, any kind of techniques is good. This is my way, only because I don't like painting with glazes or other kind of techniques. I prefer use a constant use of brush stroke and airbrush. But for me it's important to repeat constantly that this is not the only way, and my process is not the right one. It's just one kind of process. You can use it, you can take and stolen some info, some process for my one, change, adapt to your own way to paint, to your feeling, to your method. Once again, for me is a very kind topic. The reason why you paint, the reason why we paint, and the reason why I paint. I paint to express myself and have fun. Having fun for me is one of the most important thing in a miniature painting. So my suggestion is to don't stop at one kind of process, don't stop at one kind of brush or a philosophy. Try everything, and only then start to decide which will be your way. You need to try everything, because you need to discover your possibility. And at the end, the best goal in this kind of activity is having fun, be satisfied by your painting, and don't do it for external expectation. This is just my way to think at painting. Okay, I start to create a clean part on the upper part of the clothes. So I start to blend a bit, draw some wrinkles. At the end I paint skin tone and clothes in a very close method. I like so much draw very well the borders because help me to understand the main shape. Also about the shape of the sculpt, we can see several kind of shapes that are very close, for example, to each one to the other. We got this curve here, here, here. So all this part is drawn in this way, and if we are able to extend this kind of shape, we can create a sort of circle that will help our eyes to move from the face to the shoulder to the clothes to the tentacles and then back to the face. Also the general shape here below, everything is done to help you to focus on the face. Probably having a strong V shape was worst because was too hard for this kind of character and this kind of shape. Also the tentacles is sculpted to help you to have this kind of lecture. So with the paint we try to enforce this kind of feeling, and will help us to paint easily the figure and reach our goal in a very faster way. Once again I make dirty tentacles, just put a bit of water and remove it. Okay, with a brighter color we continue to create several thin layers of texture. We need to obtain a smooth surface but very well textured. And you can see how my brush stroke are totally changed from the beginning of the process. The first one was hard, was very messy. Now I'm using only the point of the brush. Sometimes I draw some lines, sometimes I focus the brush stroke on a very specific dot. Everything to create a variation. Okay, before go ahead with sketching and layering, I start to create another kind of mixture on my palette. Maybe this time will be more warm, so I add a bit of probably yellow on my palette to create the color for the hat. I will obtain a similar one but a little bit different, just to create a bit of variation, because if I paint with the same, exactly the same way, also the hat, I think I fear that there will be too much similar, too much. So I create a bit of warm black, and now I start to paint the brush, the hat. For the hat, I try to change a bit also the kind of... Oh, we can repeat this part. For the hat, I try to change not only the color, the hue, to create variation, but also the kind of brushstroke. In this way, we will got two different kind of texture. For example, for this one, I try to use very strong and covering brushstroke. And I start to wet blend directly during the drying process to create my lights. I try to use my brushstroke in this kind of movement, to use the brushstroke to move the focus on the face. The brush stroke here on the hat are more soft because I think we need to communicate also the kind of material. Maybe this kind of cloth is very old, very used, very ruined. And the end, I think that I will split on several kind of color. Maybe a bit of blood here, maybe a kind of acid blood from the tentacles, but also different kind of very old soap or dish parts. Maybe also something of a thick to create the illusion that is very very little of several kind of food. To have a complete vision, I had also now the red part, just to understand and test it, because I'm not sure if it will work very well. If it will not work, we will cover and we will change easily the color. I use a red one. It's not very important which kind of brand. I just found for in my first attempt in my box the wine red of KK, so I use this. This just to explain that is not really important sometimes which kind of brand you use, especially on this kind of process. It's more important to start to understand which kind of color, which kind of if is an acrylic, is an ink, a fine art one, a heavy body, the specific the coverage, if it's a gloss color, shiny, if the color is matte, or all this kind of info. Okay. Not bad. I like the effect. Probably we need to create some deserated lights and maybe some greenish shadows to keep it more harmony, more balance on the general shape. In the meantime, I start to sketch a bit more the texture on the hat. With a mix of the two color that I used for the texture, I start to highlight a bit the mustache and the beard, because I need to focus to start to understand all the details we will work together. So at this point, usually I need to have a complete vision of the miniature. Now I can't move more in a randomly way. I need to have a complete vision, because the following step will be the most important to refine and balance everything. Looks how changing the lights, we change the volume. Now the mustache looks like a very more big, more important for our character. So also using highlights or a brush stroke, we can change the perception of the viewer. My main idea about this character, and that this character is very a rude man, but with a sort of ancient noble kind of gesture movement. So he takes very well care about his facial hair. So we will be probably most important details to tell us about his story. In few gesture, we changed totally the perception of our character. Oops, again I ruined my tentacles, but it's not important. We take a bit of water and then we remove the color directly from the surface. Don't be afraid. In my painting process, this kind of mistake happens every hour, so for me it's nothing new. Okay. Now I have a more clear idea about our character, and we just need to proceed with several kind of texture and airbrushing cleaning for, I think, maybe 8-9 times. So I don't know if I'll show you the complete process, but I try to explain better the final step, because the process will be very boring. So at the same time I try to follow the general color, the general hue from this side of the hat I use a more bluish color. Same for this kind of the black cloth. I'll keep the shirt, this one, the second one, dark, sort of very dark gray, because it will help me to divide the several parts, and making it with another color will be probably too much. Our character is yet very rich of color. Is not a monochromatic paint, so I'm scared to add another kind of color here. Maybe I will try to paint the second cloth here in a very dark gray, just a bit textured to create interest and to not have this kind of full saturated black. So just for example this way, just to create a bit of movement. Okay, again. Okay, I used the mistake to create a sort of bouncing light here, and look like cool. Yeah, why not? Why not? So you can see my process is very free. I can touch everything in any kind of moment. Nothing is done, nothing is finished. I try to put a bit of lights also on the red part. Some desaturated one. I added a bit of a greenish color and white, the same that I used for the other part of the clothes. In this way I keep the balance, I keep up the harmony. My opinion is that if you are able to paint with a few colors and create all your value from them, your final results will look better because it will be more harmonized, will be more coherent with the complete idea. Here under the neck I got a metallic part, but I think that I will paint in a very dark non-metallic metals with no shiny reflective part, because I'm really scared that this kind of part will be more important than this one. At this point I try also to sign the eyes of my figure, because I need to start to understand which kind of feeling I want to give about it. Probably I will try to create a not surprised expression, maybe a bored one. Okay. Also during painting eyes, usually I not very clean, because I just need to create the two bulbs and then I will refine everything. Consider also that one eye is bigger than the other one, so it's very difficult to keep the same size without touch it so much. I don't have any kind of specific process to paint eyes. I just try to decide the direction of the look. And then I will refine with dots and reflection, maybe some reddish hue inside the eyes to create the sensation of the veins and the capillaries, the bloodish part of the eyes. I never use the pure white. Maybe I can use the pure white only on the reflex inside the eyes. Also because the whitish part of the eye is not pure white. It's more like an reddish, pinkish, maybe a bit ivory white. So my suggestion is never use the pure white. Maybe only for a little dot inside to create a reflection. So at the moment the eyes is a bit messy, a bit confusing, but it's just a sketch to start to create them. And now I use a bit of glossy fine art color, alizarin crimson, to create the reddish part and also to downgrade a bit the intensity of our dots. In this way it looks like a bit wet, because the finish of this kind of paint is between glossy and satin. Avoid to use too much, because your eyes will become too reddish. So just on the upper part. Okay, let dry, because we can touch now. We need to keep dry very well.